If you follow this channel long enough, you know that I'm a fan of M Night Shyamalan. Now, that doesn't mean I unabashedly love everything he does. After Earth was terrible, and Avatar was a big mess. I don't even know the source material for Avatar, but I can still understand why fans would be mad at the movie. I said After Earth was one of the worst movies of that year. Anyway, those movies aren't really suited for M. Night's style. I personally think he's at his best when he's doing smaller, contained stuff like The Sixth Sense or Unbreakable. Movies that have a certain vibe to them and often feel like something that would fit in right with the Twilight Zone. His latest movie, Old, is one that falls right in that category. It's about a group of people who are on vacation at this luxurious hotel in the tropics. They go on a trip to a secluded beach where they discover that for some reason they can't initially understand, they are rapidly aging. They try to escape the beach, but there's an invisible force that's keeping them there. I enjoyed this one. I had a few problems with it, but overall, I liked it. First off, the movie looked great. When the family arrived on the island, all the colors really popped. I'm sure this was intentional to show how the resort was teeming with life, and it worked. The cast for the most part was good. There were some that were weaker actors than others, but aside from a few moments, it never really took me out of the movie. I think the mom was probably the worst. Some of her deliveries just felt off. There was one really terrible effect that took me out of the movie for a minute. I won't say it here, I'll put that in the spoiler section. M. Night also has a penchant for weird humor, like naming the rapper Mid-Size Sedan. It's so stupid, but then I could believe that's a real rapper's name. I mean, there are real rappers named Shorty Shitstain, Bus Driver, and Trademark the Skydiver. So, Mid-Size Sedan isn't that far outside the realm of reality. I thought they did a good job of explaining things within the film. It felt right with the context of the movie. M. Night based the script off the graphic novel Sandcastles, but I don't know how close that is to what he wrote. I went in knowing very little. All I knew was that there was this beach and it made you old. The movie flowed by, and while there were slower moments, to me there weren't any dull moments. I thought it was a good-looking film with an interesting story and a very heavy lean into the Twilight Zone. Probably the most Twilight Zone-y movie he's done. And with that, I'm going to get into some spoilers, so tune out now if you don't want to hear. The really bad CG moment was the emergency surgery. They cut into the wife and it immediately healed. It looked really bad. Thankfully, they kind of showed it to get the point across, and then did their best not to show it again until the tumor was coming out. I think this instance was a case where they knew they had to show it, but really didn't want to. As for the surgery, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but can you just pull out a tumor? I figure a cancerous mass would be attached to something, and yet it just seemed like they opened her up, grabbed it, and pulled it out. I was watching the movie with my wife, and when the two kids were alone and they were teenagers, I turned to her and said, "Oh, they're doing it." 5 minutes later, the daughter came out and was pregnant. That was probably the only thing in the film I really called. I had no idea why these people were being left on the beach, and I didn't know how they were going to get out, but I knew somebody was going to get pregnant. I thought they handled that part really well, too. Having a baby on the beach would have been incredibly complicated for the movie to try to handle. They didn't have the proper things to feed the child, unless they were going to allow the 6-year-old to start breastfeeding. The other thing was, if the baby lived, you'd have a character who wouldn't be able to speak, because how are they going to teach someone to talk in a few hours? Beyond that, they would be the youngest and most incapable of being able to take care of themselves. But due to the nature of where they were, they most likely would have been the last alive. By having the child born and then die almost immediately, they were able to deliver the shock of the moment, but then not have to deal with all the stuff I just mentioned. The Instagram thought made me laugh. She was vapid and vain and about what you'd expect. Her demise was more comical than horrific. I did have a few questions, like why the children seemed to age much faster than the adults. This made me think that perhaps there was something in the food that pushed that aging more, since the kids were the only ones who ate. I know they kind of hand-waved it away as the kids growing is more noticeable than the adults, but still it felt much faster. Oh, and for people talking about the twist, there was no twist. There was a reveal. We knew the beach makes you old. We knew there was some sort of reason they were chosen to go to the beach. We knew that the staff of the hotel was in on it. What was revealed at the end was why they were doing this. A twist is when it changes your entire perception of the film. For example, let me go back to M. Night's breakout film, The Sixth Sense. In the movie, you think Malcolm Crowe is this child psychologist working with a new patient who can see ghosts. Then, in the end, we discover that Crowe was dead and was one of the ghosts that Cole can see. It changes your entire perspective of the film, and if you watch it a second time, you see the film completely different. You notice all sorts of subtle hints about the twist. Same thing with Fight Club or any other movie with a genuine twist. Now with this, there was no twist. The audience knew the hotel was in on it. They make that pretty clear. If you go back and watch the film again, it's the same movie, you just know how it ends. A twist would have been if we find out that the people on the beach knew they were dying and signed up for this, or something crazy like the hotel wasn't in on it. It would change your whole perspective of the film. I just want to get that out there. I know M. Night did this as a way to try to cope with the very real thing that is getting old. A lot of that came through in the script, like how the main married couple were able to resolve their differences before they died. It was kind of bittersweet because if none of this would have happened, they would have separated. Overall, it was an enjoyable but somewhat depressing watch. It reminded me of my own mortality and how we're all aging to our inevitable conclusion, which we never know when it'll be or how. I think the ending was meant as a way to make peace with the fact that we will all eventually die. While the end comes for us all, our lives and our spirits will live on in our children and our loved ones. Anyway, I'm enjoying these more recent M. Night films since The Visit. I think it was smart that he pulled away from the giant budgeted stuff and decided to focus more on these kinds of pictures. I think he's recognized what works best with him and he's sticking with it. I hope he continues. As always, I'm curious to see what he comes up with next.